we can grow through terrible situations.
Welcome back to Tell Me More with me, CJ Quarterbaum. Tell Me More exists to help curious people figure out some things in life. We talk about Gen Z, leadership, and preparing for the future. And today, I have the honor of doing my first in-person interview for the podcast, but also being joined by the esteemed Dr. Joanna Dillenbeck. Dr. Dillenbeck, how are you?
Good to see you.
It's good to see you as well.
Thank you for inviting me onto your podcast.
I'm glad that you are here.
Thank you. My pleasure.
So you guys are about to find out that Dr. Dillenbeck is just full of wealth and wisdom and knowledge. And I would say in my life, she has personally taught me so much. And I hope that it translates today as we get to hear her talk about something that I think is really critical, not just for Gen Z, but I think for us as a whole, when it comes to preparing for the future as well. So before we start, Dr. Dillenbeck, tell us, who are you, where are you from, and what do you do now?
Well, thank you. I mean, first and foremost, I think one of the major commonalities in our relationship over the last year and a half is acknowledging, being real about hurting people, and having a concern about, trauma, relational trauma. And my specialty happens to be working with women and couples who are looking to recover from relational trauma. But you and I also have a heart for our youth. As a former educator, administrator, principal of a middle school, for about 25 years, my life revolved around, and my background as a special educator, my background revolved around giving opportunities, giving resources, being present for people, for young people who really needed to have that presence, to really being there, available for them. I got my second master's in mental health counseling. I wasn't ready to stop working with people. I love people. I'm fascinated by people. I've been blessed by people. I've grown by the connections I've made with people. So I went back, got my master's in mental health counseling, and then, as you know, I went on to get my doctorate in counseling supervision and education. So just enriching my walk, and my research was on betrayal trauma. And as part of my research, I really stumbled upon the concept of post-traumatic growth.
And that's really where I want our conversation to go today, because you introduced this idea to me of post-traumatic growth. So what is that?
Yeah, so the beauty of post-traumatic growth, the obvious, what we need to say and what we acknowledge, is that we live in a world that's traumatizing. And it's constantly in our face through the news, through social media. So one would consider an earthquake, some kind of a catastrophe, a car accident, is very, very traumatic. But the other kind of traumas are relational traumas, where we're betrayed by people and systems that are entrusted to care for us. And in the counseling room, as I explain post-traumatic growth to clients, it kind of sets the stage for hope, because post-traumatic growth says that we can grow through terrible situations. It is possible to grow through terrible situations. We don't rush the process, but as a counselor, I can kind of see the end game. And I've had the privilege of walking with people in counseling and kind of see them get on the other side of those issues that really, cause them to lose sleep, to doubt themselves, to to really go through dark periods in their lives. So post-traumatic growth is this concept that we can grow, right, through our trauma. We can become resilient. We can become stronger. There's a art form in Japan called kintsugi, and it's just a gift to this concept, because you take a broken piece of pottery, right, and it's shattered into pieces. The way we put that broken piece of pottery back, according to kintsugi art form, is with a lacquer that's got either gold or silver or platinum, a precious metal. So when I look at this reformed piece of pottery, what I'm seeing is the brokenness, but I'm also seeing the beauty in the process, because the gold comes through. And when you walk through trials and tribulations with people, understanding that post-traumatic growth is possible, you don't negate or invalidate their brokenness, their trauma, right? But you see it as part of a landscape of something that could really be beautiful.
Yeah, I don't know if we, as people, recognize that. We hear the word trauma and we hear the word beauty, and I don't think we ever put those two things together. But when you think about kintsugi, it's broken things made beautiful again. That is life. So I think a lot about Gen Z, and we talk about betrayal and mistrust. This is the least trusting generation on record. And it kind of makes sense. When you look at the world they were born into, they started in 97, so they were born into the dot-com crash, into 9/11 and the war with Iraq and Afghanistan. And from there you have Occupy Wall Street. And then they've been told, I'm a millennial, I've been told my whole life Social Security won't be there. They're told they have no hope. The student loan debt crisis amongst this generation. Everything about their lives, when you look at, I think, young black kids born in 2010, their entire lives, they've been watching people who look like them be murdered on camera. How do you trust anybody or anything? And so it makes sense that this generation has the highest rates of depression, the highest rates of anxiety, the highest rates of suicidal ideation. And so how would you talk to someone in this cohort about this idea of post-traumatic growth and growing through all of these things?
And just to add to what you've said, not only are these situations evident, but they're ever present. They're ever present. They don't go away. 9/11 was continually spooling. Just to name one situation, the George Floyd murder. It was so prevalent and so present, and instilled such fear in the black community, and it just did not go away. People were talking about it on social media. It was part of the news. There were all different sides debating this issue, and it was somebody's life, right? So in my training as a trauma specialist, one of the things I do is work with images. And we try to instill images of calm and peaceful places. This is anything but calm. We try to resource people, we try to resource our clients with people who are nurturers, people who can give that warm hug, give that eye contact, give that affirmation, people who are protectors, right? People who have our back, and people who can listen to us incarnationally without judgment, right? And that's part of trauma work. That's part of trauma therapy. So when you think about the events that you mentioned, who is there for these kids to help them make sense of it, to help them say, this is a terrible thing, but right now, here and now, I'm that safe person for you. I have a way to make you feel safe and protected. And unfortunately, part of the problem is we don't feel safe and protected. So it's hard for us to be there for other people, but that's our responsibility as grown-ups.
Yeah.
Our responsibility as grown-ups is to find safe havens for these kids, to find connections for these kids that are live, not on social media, not this far off in my camera, on the screen, but living, breathing. Right now, your brain is talking to my brain. And as I smile at you and as I bring you in as a human being, it kind of relieves the stress that you might feel from being isolated, feeling alone, feeling worried. And not only that, for me to get part of your story without making believe that I have all of your story is huge, right? CJ, I don't know how Black Lives Matter affected you, but help me understand. Help me understand so that I can understand the best way that I know how, right?
Yeah.
And so interacting with, the Gen Z generation is a very smart generation. They have access to all kinds of media, right? Their world is so much bigger than mine, right? They understand mental health, and yet they're seeing their peers who are suicidal and sad and depressed, right? Yeah. So if you're asking what I would say to a young person that's coming to me with these kind of traumatic issues, first of all, I would validate, right, that we don't have all the answers, but help them to identify their resources, right? Brene Brown spoke about shame resilience, and what she found is that when we isolate, right, it just spools that shame. We ruminate on what's wrong with us. When we get connected to other people, it kind of demystifies what I'm going through, because I can share a commonality in your story, right? So staying connected and finding those safe grown-ups who have gone through part of what you've gone through that you trust. As grown-ups, we can't make kids trust us if we're not trustworthy.
Yeah.
Right? But, talking to Gen Zs about finding those people that are trustworthy. Find those people that have time for you.
Yeah. And I always say the kids are the canary in the coal mine, because I think you were right. It's all of us. We're all feeling this lack of safety. We're all feeling this constant pressure and anxiety. And in my post that I actually put out this week, the opening line is the kids are not well. That is generally true, but the kids are not kids anymore. The oldest members of Gen Z are 28. And I love that you use the word responsibility, because I think that as their forebearers, millennials, Xers, boomers, we're the ones who are managing them, and we're the ones who are educating them. And rather than be upset with them or anything, our responsibility is to help them walk the path that we've already walked. So rather than leading with frustration, we say, hey, you're new around here, and I know you're feeling this kind of pressure and you're feeling this weight. I've been through that. What does it look like for us to take a little more time with them, to have that like grace and compassion and empathy to help them walk the road that we've already been down?
Paradoxically, when we invest that time, we wind up by being blessed because of what I spoke to you about.
Yeah.
We are just so busy, and we don't afford ourselves the time, let alone afford the time to be with these young people, right? To sow into them, to spend time with them, to give me hope, to give us hope about what the future can be, right? And it's not Pollyannish when you said spending time and talking to them about the road we've walked. I'm human, you're human, I've made mistakes. Age appropriately, I can talk about those mistakes and what I've learned from those mistakes, right? And, speak courage into their lives. It takes a lot of courage, right, to walk through some really painful disappointments, right? And we can't idealize it. We have to show them what that looks like, if that makes sense.
I think that there's something about transparency and vulnerability that it just opens the door. And this is across generations. But I find that as a professor, when I'm in my classroom, I end every class the same way. I go, all right, ask me 3 random questions. They can be about anything. And they will ask questions that like, hey, what's your favorite sneaker? All the way to what's your biggest fear? What this kid asked me last week, what do you look back on in your life and you're the most disappointed by? I'm like, you're 18. You're asking that kind of question? But what that does is it opens a door. And now it creates this relationship, because my class is about having difficult conversations. And so because I led the way with being open, being vulnerable, being willing to talk about myself and my life, they now feel like, oh, I can talk too, because this isn't some guy up there. He's one of us. He's just old, as they like to remind me.
I can't even imagine what they would think about me if they think you're old. But what's coming up for me is that idea of safety.
Yeah.
Is a person safe? And a person is safe if they are authentic, if they are vulnerable, right? And when you think about the beauty of that transaction, right? You're not celluloid. You're not on a phone. You're not on a podcast. You're not simulcast. You're living, breathing, right? Human being. And, you know, again, having real live role models, right? I mean, I'll ask people, you know, what does it feel like to be protected? And it's a hard one. And we do have to go to superheroes and characters in a book. That's so sad to me, that people, young people, don't have a real live human role model of what it means to be protected.
Man, that's such a profound question. What does it mean to be protected? I have a piece coming out in a few weeks, the importance of real connection in these disconnected times. And there's this one of these actors, I saved the post, so I have to go find it, but he was telling this story about how he used AI to help him understand his anxiety around ordering a bagel. And he was like, it was really great, it helped me see these things about myself. And I'm like, but how much more if you had someone in front of you, someone who can hold your hand, literally and figuratively? There's only so much the computers can do and only so much the bots can do.
I asked ChatGPT this morning, do you think if I had more circumstantially difficult life experiences, if I'd be more confident asking for a bagel? And ChatGPT said, well, actually, there is a trove of academic evidence to support what you're saying, which is like, you know, growth through trauma, et cetera.
So it's not that you need validation from artificial intelligence about what you're feeling,
Yeah.
but it gives you resources.
Yeah. So I got a bagel this morning, and I felt too nervous to ask something about the bagel. And then I had this thought, which was, if I had something more objectively horrifying in my life, I'd be much more comfortable asking about the bagel, because I wouldn't have this kind of, you know, let's say needless, fantastical self-consciousness that for some reason I carry around. And so I said, is there any like literature to support this kind of thing? And it said, yes, there are theories about growth through trauma, which means like that, you know, if you experience something traumatic, you're working on growth in a way that maybe makes you less subconscious about these kind of smaller, little petty things. Little did the bagel know it was part of a discussion.
I saw this great post where the woman was like, I want AI to do the laundry and wash the dishes and take care of the stuff around the house so that I can create art. I don't want AI creating the art. And I think we're so technological as a people that we're starting to lose a bit of our humanity in this. And I'm afraid of where we go if we lose our humanity. And I think we're already seeing glimmers of it.
Yeah.
So when you talk to people about post-traumatic growth, what are some of the resistance you might get to it?
I would say, and rightly so, the biggest resistance might be that somebody, and I have to hold myself in check, right? That I'm invalidating the pain that they're in, right? And to safeguard against that, post-traumatic growth is like grief, right? Everybody processes grief and everybody grows at their own rate, right? So seeing that it's possible, right? But being careful and being slow and being respectful of people who are experiencing trauma, right?
funny. I'm gonna take a minute. I'm gonna see if I can find this real quick. I'm reading. You mentioned grief. Chimamanda Adichie's book, Notes on Grief, and she has this great line in here. Good, it's on the early pages. Grief is a cruel kind of education. You learn how ungentle mourning can be, how full of anger. You learn how glib condolences can feel. You learn how much grief is about language, the failure of language and the grasping for language. Why are my sides so sore and achy? It's from crying, I'm told. I did not know that we cry with our muscles. The pain is not surprising, but its physicality is. My tongue is unbearably bitter, as though I ate a loathed meal and forgot to clean my teeth. On my chest, a heavy, awful weight, and inside my body, a sensation of eternal dissolving. My heart, my actual physical heart, nothing figurative here, is running away from me, has become its own separate thing, beating too fast, its rhythms at odds with mine. This is an affliction not merely of the spirit, but of the body, of aches and lagging strength. We did not plan this. You mentioned grief, and I just read this last night, and man.
And post-traumatic growth feels a lot like that, right?
Yeah.
We're grieving, we're grieving the way we thought the world would be. Our families, our culture, organizations help us formulate our values and the way we think the world is going to be. And then when something traumatic happens, it really does blow everything up, right? Like that broken pottery.
Yeah.
And we really have to reevaluate how we thought the world worked.
Yeah.
Because the way we thought the world worked is not working now, right? We thought we had a loved one or a job or a position, right? And we lose that and we grieve it. And depending on the circumstances, it can create a lot of complex trauma, right? So post-traumatic growth in the right hands with the right mentors, right, is a way of saying, well, let's reevaluate the way you thought the world works. And let's see what part of that is valuable and worth holding on to. And now, how are we going to put the pieces back together? How is it going to make you stronger? How is it going to give you a stronger belief in your resilience and yourself, right? How is it going to help you? And it feels so harsh to talk about young people having this realization, but how is it going to help you change the way you look at the world and do so in a way that doesn't make you bitter and angry, right?
Yeah. I look at Gen Z between the ages of 15 and 28 right now. They have a lot of language, but they don't necessarily have the tools for processing this broken world. And in many ways, I feel for them, because when you look at the successive hits of thing after thing after thing, which has always been true, but they're experiencing this online in a never-ending news cycle. And it's almost that they never get the chance to process these things. So I have all the language, the things are constantly coming, but I don't have the opportunity to actually work through it. I look at something like conflict with friends. When I was a kid, if my best friend and I got in a fight on Friday, I didn't see him at school Saturday, I didn't see him Sunday. Monday we came back, we still mad at each other? Why were we mad? We don't remember. All right, let's move on, let's be friends again. For them, it's you get in a fight on Friday, you go home and someone's posting about it Friday night. All people are making TikToks and Instagram posts and all these things Saturday and Sunday. You come back Monday, you never had the chance to disconnect. And now you and your friend are irreparably broken over something that was probably really small to begin with.
And as an educator, a principal, administrator, somebody who oversaw many and many, recess, when something like that happened years ago, before the Gen Z generation were born, it would be a 25, 30-minute conflict resolution where I was skilled, We trained the kids to be skilled. We had mediators who could process that and bring awareness and insight to the situation. And we don't do that anymore. We don't have the time to do that.
I was going to ask why. Why did we stop doing that?
I don't know why we stopped doing it. We're too busy. We're too busy. We're too busy looking at rules and regulations and policies and procedures and standards and all the paperwork that goes with it, right?
We decided to make sure the trains run on time while forgetting about the passengers.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. As we bring this to a close, I'm curious, what are, we'll say, 2 pieces of advice you have for this generation?
I would say lean into your strengths, right? Lean into your strengths, and if you don't know your strengths, surround yourself with people who see your strengths. That can be peers, that can be grown-ups, that could be your role models, right? But tap into your strengths and to stay curious. You know, one of the things that I would ask young people when I counsel them, so in this situation, and we do it sensitively, right? What have you learned about the world and what have you learned about yourself? It can go on and be an existential question. What have you learned about God and your higher power, right? But those are questions that we usually process.
That's good. Yeah, I think curiosity is one of the greatest skills you can have in life. And then I think having people around you who see you is so important for your self-esteem, for your, just where you want to go in life, what you want to do, where you should go and what you should do. I teach in an honors college, and all of these kids in this honors college, engineering, computer science, pre-med, and I'm like, is that what you want to do? They're like, I guess so. It's just what I've always been told. But I look at this example in my own life. You have said things to me that I repeat to this day because it made me see myself in a different way. There was one thing you said to me in particular where I said, I don't think about myself like that. I don't speak about myself in that way. And you're like, well, you need to start because it's true. And I think having people in your life who can affirm you, who love you, who love you enough to be honest with you, and you can take that honesty from them, will take you so far in life.
Yeah. Be careful about who you surround yourself with. And you made a point that I have to follow up because I'd be remiss as a counselor. We are so much in our head. We need to get in touch with our heart, right? Don't betray our heart, right? We, accomplishments, degrees, this and that. We need to get in touch with our feelings and give ourselves, permission to have those feelings, right? But certainly surrounding yourself, not with somebody who will lie to you about how great you are, because kids are such great crap detectors. But when I said what I said to you, it resonated, right? It was buried, but it was inside. And you had that aha moment, right? Had I said to you, something that was disingenuous, right, or patronizing, you would have said, get out of here. We don't have time for that, right? So, that would be what we want to be for our kids, to have the time, to have the space, to be truthful.
I love what you just said about us being so stuck in our heads. One of the mantras for this year is change the narrative, because we are storytelling creatures, and we start telling stories in our heads, and we believe those stories to be true, whether they are or they're not. And those stories are informed by everything, all that has happened to us, all where we've been, everything we've experienced. And we will tend to let those stories dominate in a way that becomes unhealthy. And I say this from experience. I've spent the last week and a half ruminating and dwelling, and every time I get in the shower, I'm having conversations out loud. And if we are going to be the best version of ourselves, having people who speak a better narrative to us than we're speaking to ourselves, I think will take us so far.
Who are trustworthy.
Yes. Trustworthy people speaking a true narrative.
And from here, our story's not finished being written.
Yes.
And that's the beauty. That's really the beauty.
Where we are is a comma. It's not a period. And in a few years, it might just be a footnote. That's the encouraging word. Man, Dr. Dillenbeck, thank you for joining me on Tell Me More. Thank you for listening to this conversation. If you have thoughts, leave them in the comments below. I would love to hear what you feel and think about post-traumatic growth and maybe how you've seen that in your life. Like, comment, share, all the things that help with Al Gore's rhythm. You know what I'm talking about. And please, come back next week as I ask you to tell me more. Boom.
Thank you, CJ.
Thank you. That was phenomenal.